And I'm speaking to you from our church sanctuary. Next to me, or somewhere on the screen, is Pastor Francois Lacroix, who's also here in the sanctuary. We had this grand idea that we could somehow Zoom collectively from the sanctuary in the same room, but we now know that 2 laptops in the same room on Zoom creates all sorts of echo. So at any rate, I appreciate everyone coming. We have Walt Kaminsky here as well, and he is the host, and he's sort of managing things. And what we would like to do, I'll just run down our agenda briefly. We'd like to give an overview about Wallingford Presbyterian Church, and who we are and why we need the sign that we've proposed. And then Pastor Francois is going to do that. Then I'll talk about the sign itself, its characteristics and so forth, and talk about some of the relevant issues very briefly, studies on lighting and how the sign works at night and so forth. Then what we like to do is reserve as much time as possible for questions and comments. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail necessarily up front, because I don't want to make you sit there too long, but I'm happy to talk about any questions that come up from anything I say, or questions for something I didn't say. And we are happy to stay here to answer any questions that you have, any comments that you have. So that's essentially the agenda. The rules for Zoom meeting will be this. If you can look at the bottom of your screen, there's something called participants. We're now up to 40. And if you click on that, you will see the list of participants on the side of your screen. And when you have that open, there's something at the bottom that says raise hand. And if you click on raise hand, a little hand logo shows up next to your name. And that will be a signal that you have a question or a comment, because there's too many people to fit on one screen, even in this gallery view. So if you have a question or a comment, if you can try doing this, but we may not see you. And if you're clicking and we don't notice right away, I apologize and be patient. We do want to get to every question and comment. And then we will keep everyone muted. If you have a question, please remember to unmute yourself and then mute yourself back when the question is finished being asked. So without further ado, as I said, the first thing we want to do is, for those of you who may not be familiar with us, this is our sanctuary, decorated for Christmas. Pastor Francois would like to start by giving you a little short presentation about who we are at Wallingford Presbyterian. Some of this is video, and he may add some comments as well. So we're going to do share screen and run the video.
That didn't work.
It didn't work yet. It will work. And Dan and Jim, if you can click your mute light icons, because it's shown as unmuted. Thank you.
I don't know. Say that again.
Mute your
Click what?
icons.
Okay. I guess you're going to click.
Dan, on the lower left-hand corner, there you got it.
Everybody's just laughing at you. Don't forget to eat.
No.
All right, now be quiet because everybody else can hear it but us. Should I go get David?
No sound with the video.
My name is and I'm the pastor of the Wallingford Presbyterian Church. I want to welcome you to this Zoom meeting and thank you for taking the time to join us this evening as we outline our proposal for erecting a new church with an accompanying electronic reader on the corner of Brookhaven and Avondale Road. Conscious of the fact that some or perhaps many of you may not be familiar with our neighborhood church, I want to share a very brief video highlighting just a few facts about our church and also why we feel the new sign is a necessary addition for our outreach to our community. A tiny bit of history. There has been a worshiping community here since 1885, and the chapel, which still stands here, was constructed in 1888 and 89. It is one of the first buildings in the area and has welcomed neighbors and the building of neighborhoods as they developed around it over the past 132 years. The church has a membership of about 400 people with approximately 100 pledging units which support its near $500,000 annual budget. From the very start, the congregation was committed to be supportive of our community. In that respect, we are a busy church, busy with many programs and opportunities, not only for church members, but for our community as well, such as the Strawberry Festival, Trunk or Treat, Easter Extravaganza, Shredder Fed, the Blood Drive. The Red Wagon Ministry to feed the hungry in our community and Chester, the Deacons Fund that helps needy families enrolled in our Wallingford Swarthmore School District, the Giving Tree, the Christ Market, and Rise Against Hunger, to name a few. Then there are our educational programs addressing racial inequality, prison reform, refugee resettlement, and a myriad of other topics relevant to life in our time. In addition, our campus is used by numerous community organizations and support groups. We are home to a TCDN after-school program, BSA troops, and Girl Scout troops. In fact, Boy Scout Troop 277 was started at our church in 1943, and we are the sponsoring organization for the first BSA Girl Troop in our district. And of course, the amazing and wonderful Wallingford Presbyterian Church Cooperative Nursery School, which was started over 60 years ago by the church to serve the families in our community. The proposed sign with its accompanying electronic reader is actually a safer way to convey information to motorists driving by than the hand-painted signs, and is more aesthetically congruent with keeping with the ethos of our church building. Large white letters on a black background that do not flash or scroll are easier to read at a glance and thus safer. How do we know that? Well, as they say these days, we followed the science. Frank Noyes will address your questions about the specifics of the sign in just a few minutes. I want to make it clear that our sign proposal has no moving or animated displays, no glare, shining, or flashing, and that the sign will dim automatically and be turned off at 10 p.m. You no doubt have seen other signs approved by the township with electronic readers that do have glare, animation, etc. But that is not what we are proposing. It's pretty obvious that throughout the various building expansions over the years, the congregation has taken great care in making sure that it all looked congruent. Indeed, one would be hard-pressed to discern where one building expansion ends and the other begins. It appears as though the current structure was all built at the same time. Well, the same care and attention to detail is evident in the proposed sign and reader. Throughout the years, the church had to adapt and embrace the necessary changes that led from a corner fireplace in the chapel for heat to a modern furnace, from gas lamps to a luminous sanctuary to electricity, from mimeograph machine to copier, from snail mail to emails, from landline telephone service to computers and the cloud, from telephone trees to Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, all necessary as the church kept up with the times. There's a plaque in one of our stairwells in reference to a building addition in 1954 that reads in part, "Dedicated to the glory of God and the service of this community." We are still committed to that, and we ask for your support. We love our church, and we want it to have a good and long life in the service of the gospel and the community in which we are planted. We strongly believe that this sign is one more tool at our disposal to do just that. Thank you again for being here tonight, and blessings.
All right. And now there's an echo. Hello. Let me just get rid of this echo. Are you turned off now, Walt? Okay. So I'm now going to go through some of the specifics of the sign, but I want to start with picking up on one comment that Francois made, which was the need for the sign. As you saw at one spot in the video, there is, when there are activities here at the church, our main sign is simply the name of the church. And whenever we have an activity, we put up a temporary sign. And there was one view where we had several, a blood drive and Boy Scout dinner and something else, trunk or treat. And the problem is with that is that it just does not work. It doesn't work because those signs are small, they're ad hoc, and although it's nice that we can have them handcrafted, you can't read them from a car driving past the church. And particularly if there's 2 or 3, you can't read all of them because it's too distracting. And even if you had the time to look, the printing is too small to really understand what it says. There's a lot going on in this church. Many of the things that go on you may not be familiar with. Obviously, the big ones, everyone knows about the Strawberry Festival, the extravaganza, trunk or treat, and so forth. And the Strawberry Festival is sort of a cultural pillar of the town. But there's a lot of other things going on in the nursery school and so forth that people don't know about unless they go to our website and look at it, or they come to the church, and they're members, or they read it in our Sunday bulletin. That is not effective. And it's not just a matter of advertising, it's part of our mission as a church to serve the community, to reach out. And we cannot do it without having an effective sign that tells people who are not looking to see what's going on, but simply driving by, tell them some of the things that are going on here. Walt, if you can start with the comparison view of the existing sign and the new sign, which was a part of the video, but we'll get that pulled up. And as you saw, The existing sign is simply a two-tone description of the name of the church between two wooden posts. The new proposed sign will still have that. So that's the lighting study. The new sign has essentially a reproduction or a redo of there it is, of the name, and below that is the black field with the white printing, and that is an electronic LED reader. It's composed of LED lights in 3 colors. The reason that we have 3 colors, because the only way to actually get white lettering on an LED sign is to have the 3 primary colors all lighting up. So this is how we intend to use the sign. You can see it there with the white lettering on the black field between 2 pillars and below the name of the church. The part of the sign that is the name of the church is smaller than the existing one, and the electronic field is approximately 25 square feet. The overall sign is just under 40 square feet. The size of the sign, particularly the electronic reader, is designed based on several factors. One, it has to be large enough that you can read it safely from a car driving past without having to be distracted. And this is our consultant in designing the sign showed us traffic studies that say that, you know, you look at the amount of time you need to spend to read a sign, and the shorter the amount of time that's necessary, the less distracting the sign is. So in order to make the sign safe, you have to have lettering large enough and uncluttered enough to be able to glance at it, see what it says, and then get back to the road. And this sign is designed to optimize that. The other aspect of that is that it's intended and will only be used to show white lettering on black background. It's not going to be used for designs and drawings or scenes or any of that, because that's too distracting and hard to read. So the components that maintained or that comprise the electronic sign come in little 12 by 12 inch squares. So you have to design the size of your electronic reader based on using 12-inch, 1 square foot, panels. And so this is a 3-panel high, and I think it's 7 panels across. Seven panels across. And as you can see in there, relative to the size of the current sign and relative to the size of the header, that's what it looks like. The sign is designed technically to use directional lighting. The LED lights is directional, and it has a chip in it somewhere that prevents it from flashing. Even if we decided we wanted to have flashing, the sign is not capable to do that. It also has a monitor for sunlight, so that when the sun is shining bright, the sign is illuminated at its normal illumination. If it's a very overcast day and gray, the sign dims. At night, when the sun is gone, the sign dims to 92% to 7.5, roughly 8% of its original brightness. Because at nighttime, when you're driving past, that's enough light to read what's being said without being shining or glaring. And the sign does that automatically. In addition, there is an ordinance that says that any lit sign, whether it's light bulbs on a sign or an LED, must be turned off at 10, so it will be turned off at 10 p.m. We may leave it illuminated on Christmas Eve because we have an 11 o'clock service. But other than Christmas Eve, it's turned off at 10. Okay, if we can show now the sightline view picture. As you know, we're on the corner of Brookhaven and Avondale. And here are two pictures from Google Maps, actually. The top picture is what you would see if you're in a car stopped at Brookhaven. You're on Avondale and you're stopped at Brookhaven and you're looking up the hill. And you can see the sign, to the left of that, of the street. And clearly the sign is nowhere near where it would be to block your view when you're stopped at Avondale to see oncoming traffic. You look at the lower sign, or the lower photo, and that's the view coming down Brookhaven toward Avondale, and you can even see there's a car in the background there. And by the way, you can see a blood drive sign too in that Google Maps picture. And that shows that the sign, that's the existing sign, and the new sign is going to go in the same location, so that you can see that you will not be blocked from seeing cars as they approach Brookhaven from Avondale. So in our view, the size of the sign, which will be about 7 feet when you have both the name of the church and the reader, is not going to impair any driver's view of oncoming traffic. Another aspect of it that we think is important is that you may have seen in the prior one that there's 2 pillars on the side of the sign, and the name of the church placard and the electronic sign are posted between 2 pillars, and they're designed to look like stone. They're not actually stone, but it's a composite cement type of material that lasts a long time, and it is a stone facade look. And that is because it is consistent with and blends in with the stone of the church. We studied this proposal have studied it for 5 years. And we, like many people in the township, started out with very cynical we looked at electronic signs as scans. And what we have attempted to do, and we feel we've done it, is to design the sign so that the overall structure blends into the church property, and the electronic reader does not appear in an inconsistent way with a residential neighborhood that we're in, and it's not inconsistent with the facade of the church that's right there. That was intentional, and it took a lot of work to get that appearance. So there is an ordinance that prohibits animated flashing or moving signs anywhere in the township. And in our view, since the sign is going to be white lettering on a black background, and it won't be animated, it won't be moving, and there won't be flashing, the sign that we propose actually complies with that. We did ask the township for relief because LED readers are capable of having animated, moving, scrolling displays, but we're not intending to use that. So our view is, if we don't have animated or moving displays, we're consistent with that ordinance. The township also has an ordinance that says that signs in residential districts for churches and other non-residential uses can be 25 square feet. But it also says that if you're on 2 frontages, as we are, Avondale and Brookhaven, you can have 2 signs. So we're allowed by right to have 2 25 square foot signs. We, in fact, are proposing 1 combined sign. It's the name of the church on the top and the reader on the bottom, and it's less than 40 feet. So we could put a sign that says Wallingford Presbyterian Church, a new version of our existing sign, and we could put separately an LED reader that does not move or have animated displays, and we feel we can do that as of right. But we would like to put it together. We think that the overall presentation and the structure is appealing and consistent with the neighborhood. It's safe and so forth. And so that's what we'd like to do. And so at this point, I'm going to open it up to questions and comments. As I said at the outset, I'm covering these things sort of at a high level, and I'm happy to cover these or other issues in more detail if anyone has questions. So we can, I guess, remove that display and see if anyone has a question or comment. And we have one from Daphne Bogert.
Okay, Frank, thank you
Hi,
for.
Daphne, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I got it. I want to, first of all, thank you
But I
for.
can't hear you. Oh, hold on. Now I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, first of all, for putting this together. My understanding is that you're trying to reach out to the community and really share what you're trying to do, and I appreciate that you're all taking the time to do that and educate those of us who live in the community and had a series of questions about this. So I have a few kind of questions and comments. In looking at the names of people who are here, I was kind of struck by the fact that there were a number of people who had actually sent in notifications or comments to the township regarding the sign, whether it be for or against, and I don't see a lot of them. Do you know if they were invited to this?
So we attempted to invite, well, the primary way that we invited people, we told our own congregation about it, and we notified Matt Garson, Second Ward Commissioner, is here, and Micah Knapp, who's the Third Ward Commissioner, and Max Cooper, who is First Ward, but he's building and zoning. And I know that Matt circulated the notice of the meeting as he had circulated the notice of the zoning hearing board earlier. So we're in the Second Ward, so this is primarily from the zoning perspective, a Second Ward issue. And we did reach out to people that we know in the Second Ward, but I think that Matt's email was probably the main source of circulating it to people who we don't know personally.
Oh, okay. All right. I was just curious because I know my husband sent something in and he doesn't read any of Matt's emails, so he had no idea about this. Anyway, all right, thanks. Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I just sat here and brought up Google Maps, and I was looking at kind of the pictures. You drive up to the church, and I noticed the Leaper House sign is right there on Avondale Road, and it really struck me as I was listening to some of what you said in the was being said in the YouTube video about the historic nature of the church, and sitting there and having kind of a sign leading you towards the Leaper House really brings home some of the historic nature of the community and character. When I start thinking about the aesthetics of a large sign there, the scale of it, it strikes me as being just extremely out of place, in an area that's really pushing for, we've got the train station, which is a nice historic building. We've got Hinkson's Corner. We've got, we have the church, we have the Leaper House, all in this area, and we're really pushing at beautiful, stone homes in the area. It just seems very large to me. I know in your application, there was a really great telling picture that had like the man standing next to the sign.
Mhm.
Obviously someone who's taller than me, because I'd make it about halfway up the sign. And I thought, wow, that's a really large sign for, kind of for the general, character of the church and everything. So that was a little concerning to me. But when you talk about the sign, you mentioned, kind of the size of the different panels and everything. Do you know how many letters you can actually display at any given time on the sign you're proposing?
Yeah, so obviously the pixels are 16 or something. So you can display letters that are too small to read from the street, for sure. And so the size, though, again, is guided by not what you could read if you were standing next to the sign, but what you could read if you were driving past the sign. That's the function of the reader.
Of course.
So if you make smaller letters, we could fit more words on, but it would be harder to read. And if it's harder to read because if you look at it, you need to be able to see the whole message in a glance so that you can look back at the street. So that we're not using smaller letters, which we technically could. If we reduce the size of the reader, we could fit the same words in, but they would be too small to read.
Right.
And that would make it, an issue. Now, I'd point out on this that if you drive past the sign at Mother of Providence, which is about 1 square foot smaller than ours, so it's essentially the exact same size. The reader's the same size as our reader, and their header's about the same size. And when you look at the displays that are there, which use, colors and pictures and so forth, at least my experience is it's hard to read what they're saying because there's too much on the sign. And so even though it's the same size as ours, it has, even though it has the same size, it's hard to read what it says. What we want to do is make a message that's easy to read, easy to grasp in a glance. And I think that the metric is 8 inches. 8 inches is the size of letter that you need for a car driving on a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit road, about 15 feet when the sign's 15 feet off the side of the road. That's what you need to be able to read it.
Okay, so I'm all right. I am good at math, but kind of looking at the sign. I mean, you're looking at a pretty brief message that would go on the sign. Hashtag come give blood, or whatever. So so when when you have a bunch of messages, it'd be pretty hard to get all of those in. I like all the little signs that appear, but you would be fairly limited in what you can in message. So the concept of having multiple signs and then applying it to this it's really kind of apples to oranges.
Well, and that's a really excellent point, Daphne, because I didn't mention that. So the concept is obviously that we want to be able to say more than one message, but obviously you can only have one message on the sign at any given moment. So the standard is that you leave a message on there for 8 or 10 seconds or 30 seconds, but no less than 8 or 10 seconds. And then you put another sign. So certainly someone driving by the sign could see, and we had 2 messages. Let's say we had, come join us for worship Sunday at 10. And then our other message was Strawberry Festival, June 3rd. You might only see one of those messages as you drive by. I get that. But because we don't want to be, alternating too fast. But right now, we don't have the ability to have 2 messages even on the same day. And the blood drive sign, you only know it's a blood drive because you see the red dot. You can drive by 3-4 times, you won't know when it is, what day it is. The sign for the spaghetti dinner, you won't know anything. You'll just know, oh, there's a sign there. They must be doing something. Yeah, why don't you show, while we're talking, let me pull up or I'll have Walt pull up the comparison of the current sign and the new sign.
Okay.
Here's an example of this is a close-up. You can see in this one, the Red Cross blood drive sign, another sign for Shrove Tuesday, and then our regular sign in the background. Now, this is a person standing right in front of it. In this case, on this particular day, we would have a sign that said blood drive March 20th, 2 to 7. Then the next message would say Shrove Tuesday pancake dinner, March 5th. And it would go one sign, then the other.
Okay, so you mentioned that you're putting up these signs to bring in more people to your activities. Maybe bring more people into your church and all kind of. It's a marketing. We'll call it marketing, right?
It's not marketing, but I'll let
but
you
it
finish
kind of
another-
it, right? You're marketing the blood drive. So how do you know how effective your current signs are in terms of pulling people in? to your activities?
Do you mean, can we quantify the number of responses we get from the blood drive sign, that the wooden blood drive sign, versus if we had it on an electronic reader? No, we can't. I will tell you that our blood drive, which we've been doing for, as you saw in the video, for 60 or 70 years, is almost exclusively members of the church. So they get that kind of message, you know, in multiple ways, on the emails and in the church bulletin. But
Excuse me, Frank,
yeah,
could I just comment to that a little bit?
and this
I'm
is Jenny Montague,
and
and she's a member of the sign committee.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, but I did want to note that one year when we did not have the egg extravaganza signs for the egg hunt out, attendance to our egg hunt that year was significantly down. And in talking to other organizations that did put up electronic signs, each one did indicate quantitatively that the electronic sign made a difference in attendance to their activities, their church. And so, you know, they had no regrets in getting the electronic sign put in. I mean, we talked to Rose Street Park. We talked to our Reformation Lutheran Church on 252. We talked to several organizations, the Walden School. We talked to, I mean, various organizations. I also want to kind of go back to your size question, where, you know, you see the size of the man next to the sign, and you see thought it's a rather large sign. So the sign committee did do a complete 2-scale mock-up and put it out there on the lawn, just to make sure, because I had those same concerns. Are we going to put in the sign and it's just going to be like, whoa? So we did an actual 2-size mock-up and did various sizes. And we felt that the sign that we did present to the congregation, to session, that was, it fit the space out on the lawn. Like when you're standing next to it, it might seem big, but when you're driving by, it is appropriate for that space. And we had the sign company drive their truck up there to put in the actual square footage of this electronic reader. And we also thought, well, maybe we, instead of 36 inches, do we go 24 inches? But it seemed too small without enough information that we could put up at once. Again, reading enough information safely without you know, waiting for the next message to come up, like being in mid-message of, you know, Strawberry Festival, wait for it. When's the date? When's the time? So we did take all of that into consideration when we came up with the final recommendation. So, so I understand your concerns, because I also had them. So that's why we actually went to those lengths to make sure the size, everything was perfect. The stone would match the actual stone on the church, because again, if you go and get real stone, there's no guarantee that that stone would match the stone on the church. So that's why we opted for the faux stone, so that they can actually color match the stone to the church, and that it looks aesthetically pleasing.
So, okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate your, you know, obviously you've been very involved and are very passionate about this, and I appreciate that. So, you know, and you've talked to kind of other groups. I mean, it's to me, you have a sign, you know, you don't really know how effective it's going to be. You know, you are limited even when, you know, when you think about it, you're putting a sign on a, you know, on one street in the township. And obviously from, you know, again, just think about it from a promotion or marketing perspective, your audience is limited there, right? So, you know, it is, it's just something to consider that, you know, if you're trying to promote an event, that's probably not your best way to do it. There are probably other ways to do it, you know, Facebook, you know, other social media methods. It's amazing how much can get out there to people versus a sign where again it's a limited thing. My understanding also is that intersection there, as someone who's gotten into a bad accident in the area, is not the safest. I think someone actually drove through the train tracks once. There've been a number of accidents. Probably not the best place for people to be reading signs when they're going by. But anyway.
So Daphne, I will appreciate you raising the traffic study issue. I will get to that in a minute. I think Pastor Francois would like to comment further on your prior comment or question.
Okay.
It's me. I'm not sure what view you've got on, but I'll keep my mask on. I just want to address the historical nature of the neighborhood. I pastored a church in Western New York, in the village of Geneseo, New York, and the whole village was on the registry of historical places. I can tell you that when you live in a village like that, you can't really paint your shutters without getting approval. So I appreciate the historical nature of Wallingford, but I think we need to be careful about being selective as to what we see. It's pretty clear that a lot of the neighborhoods were not built in the 1800s. They were built after the Second World War and the expansion of neighborhoods at that time. There are modern houses that are built across the street from older historical houses. There are additions to older houses that are added. So I do appreciate that, and I appreciate the history of the area. But I think we need to be careful as to how selective we feel that this particular area is. In fact, right across the street from the church is clearly not a house that was designed and built with any kind of historical consciousness. So I do want to make that point, and I know that Frank has something to say about the accident report, so I'll turn that back over and I'll be quiet.
If I can just jump in. So I grew up in Concord, Massachusetts. So when we got to get on that history scale, like I'm right there with you on that. And one of the things that the town did a very good job on was making sure that areas that had historical homes, historical churches and stuff remained fairly consistent in the appearance, so that it really built a nice character for the area. So.
And just so it's clear, Daphne, that we believe pretty strongly that the pillars and the new nameplate and the black field electronic sign with white lettering on it is going to blend in very nicely. We work very hard at that because this is our church. We not only drive by it, but we come here. And I understand your concern about it. And I think that maybe some people envision, what our sign will look like based on what other signs they've seen look like. And I can tell you that we are very confident that this will blend in very nicely. I do want to mention that there was a traffic study, some information that was provided. I think Matt had requested that from Chief Splain. And it reports accidents, I'm thinking over the last couple of years, let's say, between the train tracks, Rogers Lane, Possum Hollow, Avondale, Church Lane, Kershaw, and all the way up to Brookhaven and Providence Road. And of those intersections, there were no traffic accidents reported at Avondale and Brookhaven. And there was one traffic accident reported at Church Lane and Brookhaven. So I just don't think that this sign, when you're crossing the tracks, you're barely going to even notice it. It is not going to be a distraction. It's not going to be an obstruction. And when you're up at Kershaw, up the hill, you may be able to see the sign in the distance, but it is not a distraction. It's not going to interfere with people coming on and off of Kershaw. And so relative to of that string of intersections, Avondale is the only one that hasn't had a reported accident over this period of that study. So we're confident that that from a perspective of not being an obstruction and also not being a distraction, you know, the consultant we had from Wildfire, just flatly told us, electronic signs do not cause accidents. But if they do, it's because they're distracting. And if they're distracting, it's because there's too much going on the sign. So we avoided that.
So, yeah, my understanding is there's been about 36 accidents or so in that corridor. And just also consider
Yes,
the fact that
in
just
the last couple of periods, there were about 30 accidents reported. None of them were at Avondale and one was at Church Lane. Most of them were at Brookhaven and Providence. The next most common was at the railroad tracks, Rogers Lane.
Well, aren't most accidents reported at the major intersection that's close to it? But also remember that too, that, you know, your accident is going to happen, you know, if you're distracted or anything happens, it's going to happen further from it because it takes time to go and swipe someone. So if I can just jump to a couple other questions, because you know, we talk about the size of the sign, and you know, my understanding, and you know, I've actually never gone and asked for a variance, although I've been to a few of the meetings where people have talked about that. There's a process for this, and one of the key elements of this, I believe, is to show a hardship, right? I mean, you can't just say, well, I want this, you know, can I have it, in order, because we have a zoning regs, right? And you know, they have to have some kind of a hardship. What exactly was the hardship that was presented?
So the section of the code that addresses no animated moving or flashing signs is not evaluated on a hardship variance standard. It was evaluated on a special exception standard. And the special exception in the code is a much looser collection of considerations.
So I'm not asking about the electronic.
The size of the sign is regulated by a hardship. And hardship is, under the code, is a hard standard to meet. But I would point out that we are allowed, as of right, we could go out tomorrow and take the sign that we're proposing, take the top half off of the bottom half, plant the Wallingford Presbyterian part of it in the ground on the quote frontage of Avondale, and plant the electronic reader on where the current sign is on the frontage of Brookhaven. And we would have a right to do that, because put together, we're allowed to have two different 25 square foot signs.
Right.
We're not proposing to have two signs, or put it differently, we're proposing to put one of our signs on top of the other.
Right. Well, but so Frank, I mean, I have, you know, I have my primary lot and we have a secondary lot. I could put two houses here, but I can't stack them on top of each other either. So, but what was the hardship for the size of the sign? I missed that.
The hardship, we presented evidence of the hardship that being able to communicate to the general public cannot be done without a sign that has a reader component that can be changed. I'm not here to debate. If we go to court on the variance appeal, the court will decide whether we can meet the standard for hardship. There was no evidence presented to the hearing board opposing that. But what we want to do is not pursue that process, Daphne. We want to come up with a solution that's comfortable to the township and to the residents, and so that we can, you know, not that we don't want to win, we want to have something that everyone is comfortable with. And that's the purpose for tonight's meeting. So I'm happy to have other questions from you, Daphne, but I see there's at least two other people. So if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's fine, because I actually have to go eat my dinner. So I just wanted, thank you for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Let me say this to you, if you have to leave or if anyone else has to leave, hang on, Helen. That at the end of this, we're going to ask you to send in an email, info@wallingfordpress.org. info@wallingfordpress.org. And we would like you to send us an email with comments, questions, and most importantly, expressions of support or expressions of non-opposition. We'd like to collect that information. And if Daphne, you have other questions, or you'd like to pursue these questions further, I'm happy to pick it up with you.
Okay, I appreciate that, Frank. Thank you very much.
Okay. So Helen, can you unmute yourself or?
Being a veteran of many Zoom meetings today alone, I can unmute myself. Thank you. I really appreciate all of your presentation and Francois and Jenny and all your comments. That's really good. I just have one quick question, which I guess if you're not going to appeal the zoning variance is not as critical. But what I don't understand is why you said the St. John sign is the same size. So size shouldn't be an issue if the township has already approved a sign of that size. And clearly the St. John signs is the electronic part is much more objectionable than what we're proposing. So I guess I don't understand why we are in this situation when they got their sign.
So I will thank you for that. I will say that objectionable is a subjective assessment, but the St. John sign is what everybody thinks of. I'm convinced of that when you think of electronic signs in front of churches in Wallingford. It is subject to a 25 square foot limit, so it was required a variance, and it was granted a variance. It was granted a variance by the zoning hearing board for relief from the square footage requirement under the hardship test that Daphne mentioned, and I won't go through with any of you what that means. But the decision granting that variance does not explain the analysis of hardship. It just grants it. So, so that sign was subject to the same standard, and they were able to get a variance on the sign.
You're on mute, Frank.
Yes, can I speak?
And who's next, Andy or Jen?
No, this is Bill Gonzalez.
Oh, Bill Gonzalez. Okay, Bill. And then we'll do Andy. And then who else had their hand up? Jenny
Okay.
Albany and
Okay.
Sally Henderson.
Briefly, you've mentioned several things about the sign, and I'm very curious for the amount of money that you all are spending on that sign. How many professional, beautiful signs could you put there as needed? I mean, considering what the sign, a sign company would charge you instead of that hand-done strawberry festival, but a professional sign, and it even can be a picture. You could do thousands for the same amount of money. And it doesn't make any sense why we have to put up with a sign a lighted sign when you can have signs there that will bring as more of a message for people to come to your different affairs. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Why spend so much money, particularly since we, the people that live here, do not want it? Now, you might have a lot of members that do not live in this area, but away from your church, that say, oh, sure, you can have a sign there. Listen, we live around here. We do not want something that is offensive. And you seem to think that this is not offensive. To me, let's deal with the realities. You can have nice signage there that can bring what you need, and you can put it in and out. And let me tell you, much cheaper than your sign that you're proposing for. And now, I mean, and you can really, it's silly for the number of events that you want to publicize. And think about that, the number of events you want to publicize. You can do really nice big signage, and it doesn't have to be electronic. It really doesn't.
Well, you're listed as Lynn, but I think you said your name was Ben.
No, my name is Bill Gonzalez.
Oh, Bill, I'm sorry, Bill. We actually, have found in our experience that we cannot do nice looking signs that would be aesthetically pleasing to announce the different events that we have announced in the past. We also found that there's no way to also communicate ongoing programs like the nursery school, which, not surprising, is having a little bit of an enrollment issue this year. And again, respectfully, we think that we have made a great effort and successfully encasing this electronic sign in stone pillars under a replica of the current church sign, which I don't think anyone thinks is offensive. And we think that the overall package will not be offensive. And I understand that the notion of electronic sign has negative connotations, but we really do believe that there's no, the alternatives you are suggesting are not viable. They just aren't. We've looked
Excuse
at
me,
them.
can I interrupt you a minute? To say that signage, printed signage, made professionally and put up there, you're saying is not viable? I mean, please, please.
It's
I mean,
not viable.
think about what you're saying.
I am thinking about it, Bill, and it's not viable because we could have the Strawberry Festival sign done once and have it change the dates every year. We could have the trunk or treat sign done once and change the dates every year. But we cannot create a quote professional sign for the ongoing programs for our upcoming series on racism. We just did a multi-part series on racism. There's just too much going on. It might work for a couple of events during the year, but it's just not, it doesn't meet our needs. What we are doing now is, and granted, we're not paying professional sign companies every time we need a sign, but what we're doing now is announcing a limited number of events that we hold in a way that only works because people know that the blood drive. And so whether they can read what the sign actually says is kind of secondary, and they know the Strawberry Festival. It's just not something that we think is viable. So,
I'm not
sorry.
saying have the same, excuse me, I'll just say my final piece here.
Mhm.
Listen, you can have a different strawberry sign. You can have a different blood sign every year for, a hundredth of what your electronic sign is going to cost. To say that you cannot get professional people to come there and put the signage, you call them the next day that sign's going to be there, and they will put it up. And it'll be a lot less expensive in the long run than your electric sign. And it'll be prettier, and it'll be more thought out than a little, your little block lighted signs. It really will be much nicer and much pleasing to the eye. And that's it. Thank you.
all right, thank you for your comments, Bill. We have
Frank.
a number of people teed up, but I'm going to defer to
Frank,
Matt.
Could I just want to make a suggestion just to maybe help with the process. If when people make comments, if they could just identify, are you a Ward 2 resident, or if you want to say the street you live on, you don't have to give your exact, like I'm at 106 Avonbrook Road. You all don't have to say your house number, but it just kind of helps to get a flavor of where people are from. I know when Mr. Gonzalez spoke, he's actually a near neighbor of the church, but there are a lot of folks on here that I don't know. So I'll step off, and I just wanted to make that.
And I appreciate, Matt, I know that's what you guys do at the Board of Commissioners. Anyone who makes a comment that gives their address. So I think we had Andy Yost and Ben Pickup. What's that?
Andy, you go first. You've been aiming to get in there. I'll go after you. Andy, you have to unmute.
Okay, Andy, go. Not hearing him. So Andy, we're not able to hear you even though you're not shown as being on mute. And maybe your volume. That's the speaker volume. Okay, now you're on mute. Now you're off. Try again. No, there's something. Andy, I'm going to go to the next person and keep working on it. Or you can also, if you want, you can open the chat feature and type a message. But in order to keep it moving, I guess it says Ben pickup, but Dana, you were at the, it's both of you, Ben and Dana.
Yeah, we're both here. Thank you. We live on Sykes Lane. Our backyard property backs the church property. And, you know, I've spoken to Jenny off the record. I attended the zoning board meeting where the variance and the exception were unanimously denied by the zoning board. So I will say that just as a direct neighbor of the church who lives in a neighborhood that has a majority of opposition to this sign, it feels, it definitely, and I mentioned this in the zoning board meeting, it leaves an interesting taste in our mouths about, you know, how the pursuit of this sign, given the opposition and very vocal opposition of the sign, the electronic sign. I personally, Ben and I are not opposed to a larger sign that is not electronic. We are strongly, as are the folks we are aware of in surrounding neighborhoods, strongly opposed to the electronic sign. That's where our strong opposition comes.
Right. And you mentioned, I think, Dana, that if we had lettering the same size, but we used hand like card things to put it up. So you're not opposed to the size of the lettering on the sign.
I am
just
not
opposed to the fact that we would use LED lights to create the letters.
Strongly opposed to LED lights, any type of electronic signage. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, we don't have to get into the nuances of our opposition. It's been stated before. Again, it's on the record, it's off the record. But the point is that, you know, I'm just curious, and this kind of goes to Daphne's earlier point about this being a marketing or, you know, getting the word out. You know, letting people who pass by know about events at the church, let people in the community who happen to be walking by know about events in the church more easily. I'm just curious what the quantitative studies are that an electronic sign increases membership at a church in a purely residential area. Like what studies can we turn to? I would imagine they're mostly anecdotal, but I could be wrong. Do you have any?
So there are a couple of points there I would like to address, and one of them, I appreciate you picking up on what Daphne said. This is not a sign intended to grow our membership, okay? And it's not a sign intended to market the church as if we're a business, because we are not a business. We are a church. It's not a marketing plan. It's a mission. It is our calling. And just like we are, you know, we consider part of our status as a church and our faith journey, quite honestly, to be outreach to the community, whether people are members or not. That's why we offered the parking lot to commuters when there was construction on Turner, and we've continued to do that. That's why we let neighbors come onto our playground and play all the time. That's why we host the Strawberry Festival, which, you know, is a cost to the church, and all of the proceeds go to a charity like city team or Chester East Side. It's why we do the extravaganza. Why do we do that? Because we want people to come to experience our church community. And if, as a result of that, they become interested in participating in the church, that's a different issue. So we are not, so the first part of the answer is we're not on a mission to grow the church. We're on a mission, but it's not to grow the church.
Understood.
The second part of that, though, is that in these times, it is a difficult proposition to keep a church going as a viable entity. We're, as Pastor Francois said, we have a number of members on the rolls, but essentially it comes down to about 100 families that financially support us. Many of our members are more elderly. We need to continually, be viable. There are churches in the Philadelphia Presbytery that go dip down to a certain point in terms of membership, that they cannot remain open. We don't think we're there, but it is something that is a reality. We need to make sure that people around us know everything that we're doing, because we work hard, we're passionate about it. We think it's part of our mission as Presbyterians to present these opportunities and fellowship to our community, and because it's, that's what the church does. So we do bristle a little bit when we're compared to marketing.
You can replace the term marketing with promoting events. I'm not slighting your, intentions in any way, shape, or form. And as a neighbor, direct neighbor of the church, and my children attended, again, this is all on the record, so this is just for people who are attending who didn't hear before, but my children attended the Wallingford Co-op Nursery School, all three of them. We use the playground all the time. The church is a phenomenal neighbor. This is definitely a hiccup for us. We're surprised, as are honestly any of our direct neighbors who you speak to. But understood what the intent and the mission is. But I would like to have, let me say a few things and ask a few things, and then you can hopefully address all of them kind of in one foul swoop. Again, curious about the quantitative study about how signs really, are they going, is an electronic sign versus some other kind of outreach? I mean, if I remember correctly, the electronic sign is extremely expensive for a church with 100 families who are supporting, who are the financial base. Can you remind me what the cost of the sign is? Was it upwards several tens of thousands of dollars?
So the cost of the sign, yes, it's north of 30,000.
Yeah, that's my recollection, that it fell closer to 40, if I'm not mistaken. It doesn't matter, 30, 40. I would argue, and again, this is as a neighbor who's in opposition of an electronic sign, that for a church who is striving for tremendous outreach, and I'm not a member of the church, that money could be spent so much better with outreach that is aligned with the day and times we live in. And I know that probably a lot of your population is not on social media, but I'm sure that our commissioners would be happy to broadcast to the community whenever there's an event. I'm sure there's ways to get the word out that doesn't offend direct neighbors, by way of an electronic sign. It struck me how expensive it is for, to your point of just the viability of funds within the church. So, my points, their questions, the quantitative study, the money being put towards the sign. And, we are doing this after a unanimous denial that the township zoning board made. So you can understand the prickly nature as a neighbor that, the pursuit of this sign, again, the size doesn't bother me. The electronic piece thoroughly offends. And the pursuit of that aspect of this sign in the face of such opposition, both from a board and from very vocal neighbors, upwards of 25 or so, those are the people who happen to write, right? Like if you have side conversations, of course, within your church, you can find more than 25 people who support the sign. Are they direct neighbors who live on Sykes, Kershaw, Church, Avondale, Brookhaven, even over to Providence Road? My guess is probably not, just a guess, or Wallingford Hills for that matter. So I just hope, and I will write to info@Wallingford Pres, we will, just hope that it's taken into account the neighborly impact component piece.
Well, and I appreciate that, Dana. And, I'm aware that you are maybe not going to be convinced, although when I'm trying to understand the exact nature of your objection, it's the fact that the sign creates lettering electronically, rather than by a hand. So the fact
it's
that
an
the sign
aesthetic and it's a historical, honestly, Pastor Francois, I do appreciate your reference to, the historical components, but if you look at the signs throughout the community, and, Ben is on the Parks Committee, there's new signage representing Furness Park and Welcome to Nether Providence on Baltimore Pike. None of those are, they're all kind of in keeping with each other, right? And I'm not saying that Wallingford Presbyterian's, non-electronic sign has to be the same as those signs, the township signs I just mentioned. But the minute, it came up in the zoning board meeting that an electronic sign, it's just going to be black and white lettering. But at the Strawberry Festival, it might have a red strawberry. But at Christmas, it might be red and green. So it's just, there's the fine lines become a little blurry when that started to being interjected, and the potential with an electronic sign of being not in keeping with the community that we live in,
Well, and this is our dilemma, and obviously you've just nailed it, because the intent of the church is to use the electronic sign in the way that we have shown and said. The other example of an electronic sign is not used that way. And so I can understand that you might feel like we are going to start at one place and go to another. But, the approval process requires conditions, or it can include conditions. There are conditions on the zoning approval of the Mother of Providence St. John sign. If you think that we're going to bait and switch, we're not. We are thoroughly convinced that the electronic sign field in the context of the sign we are proposing is going to fit in the neighborhood. It's going to fit with our 130-year-old building. And you asked about quantification. I don't think we have quantification, but we do have, as Jenny mentioned a few minutes ago, each place that we talk to that has an electronic sign, where there are events to be announced, not just the name of the church or business or park or whatever, has communicated to us that the electronic sign messaging is an effective way to increase participation in their events. And that's what we believe. And, so that's the premise that we're working on. We don't think that there's another effective alternative for what we need to do. Let's see, who's next? And I don't want to cut you off, Dana.
I just
but
want to, no, I want to thank you. I do want to thank you. I think this would have been really helpful to do on the front end. It feels really after the fact. You've already been unanimously denied by a zoning board. So to do this after the fact as you approach an appeal potentially seems out of, you know, out of sync. But I do appreciate you doing it.
Yeah, and actually I appreciate you mentioning that, because I want to mention that, you know, it became clear to us in August that there were a number of residents who would have liked to have this kind of session before we went to the zoning hearing board. And it took us a little bit by surprise, quite frankly, because we were in front of the zoning hearing board in 2016. We had an earlier application that we actually presented and then withdrew it because we weren't really ready. Quite honestly, we had some of the specifics that were not clear. And at the time that we went through the process in 2016 of filing the notice and the township issued its notice, there was no opposition. One person showed up at the zoning hearing board. So maybe we were, you know, that was a deception. That was somehow led us to underestimate the importance. But then, of course, the other issue is that it's very hard to try and do a sort of a community outreach this year of all years. So yes, we did. It would have been better, and if we had to do it again, we would have a presentation before the board. But we did have a thorough presentation at the board, and we're having another one tonight. So we are comfortable that, and we'll have another one if we need to, we're comfortable that the people who are interested in this sign are having adequate opportunity to find out what its capabilities are, what all the characteristics of it are. I haven't shown the lighting study yet. So I do want to show that at some point, but I think we're behind on some comments. I see Gail Weaver and Sally Anderson and Walt. Walt, you wanted, yes, Walt, who's sitting here hosting the meeting, has something he would like to say or show.
I think Sally was before me.
Okay, I want to address a couple of things. I think you got one on time. We talked to a number.
Who is on?
I think Walt went on mute.
Oh,
I think it's you, Sally.
okay. Well, I'm Sally Anderson. I live around the corner from the church in Wallingford Hills, just over the tracks. I've been a member of the church for 37 years, and I support the sign. And I have to say, initially, I wasn't keen on the sign. I was on the Board of Commissioners for one term, and one of the things that I was very concerned about was all these signs popping up, real estate signs and roofing signs and signs that would just stay up, and I thought were very unattractive. And I think some of the signs at the church, while they were handmade and with the best intentions, you know, 3 or 4 of them at a time, they weren't very attractive. And as we've discussed tonight, they weren't very effective. I was unable to make the earlier meeting. We were out of town, or I would have been there to express my support, because the more I've learned about the sign, the more I'm in favor of it. And you can call it marking. I think what the church is trying to do is remain relevant in these times when things are changing rapidly. And we do struggle to maintain our membership and attract new members. So that's always a concern. And we see this sign, I think, as one more tool in the tool chest that we can use to communicate who we are, what's going on, and our relevance today. And I just want to point out one thing. Francois spoke about the various things that our church has done for the community. And in the 37 years I've been a member of the church, I don't think I can remember any time when we've come to the community to ask for something that would help us. And this is one time. I want to mention one thing that I think is really important. And many of you, about 20 years ago, SEPTA wanted to expand the Wallingford train station. And the community was up in arms. In fact, a number of people on this Zoom call tonight were among those who were opposed to the expansion of that train station. They were concerned about more traffic, light shining into their living room at night, loss of open space because they would have had to take some of Furness Park. Well, the church, without anybody even asking them, saw that we could open up our parking lot and instead of having SEPTA put in a new parking lot in 88 spaces, we opened our parking lot and let people park there. And for several years, it was free until things kind of got out of control and there were so many people parking there that we had to limit it. And so we did. And now we charge, some minimal amount. I think we have 40 spaces. So, there was an example when the church really came through to help the community, to help this near neighbors, right in this area. So I think now we're just asking for a little consideration when we have an issue, then we're trying to stay relevant. And I do think this sign is attractive. I'm one for neighborhood beautification, architectural integrity, and I think this sign really does it. And I would just ask people to just step back and just say, isn't this something we could live with? And it's my understanding that the 4 neighbors who are closest to the sign, who are actually going to see it, all are in favor of it. And one last thing, I just want to correct the record. In terms of the fatality on the car that fatal accident on the train tracks, that was my uncle who was killed. He was 95 years old. That had nothing to do with traffic. It was a freak accident. He was the only one in that whole area. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Walt has a comment.
I just had a couple of comments I'd like to address to some of the things I think I heard from Dana. And Dana, if I have you wrong, please correct me. One is that you talked about a non-electronic or non-LED type sign as being acceptable, if I heard that right. And so I will use an example and test this. Would something like the sign at the Walden School on Providence Road up near 5 Points and Media be what you're talking about?
I think that is in keeping.
You're on mute?
No, I'm not.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I would support that more than I think you can do better, but I think it's better than electronic sign for sure.
Okay. Well, a group of us went up and talked to the headmaster at the school about their sign, thinking, okay, that's a possible way to go before we decided on the electronics. And she talked about how effective that was at increasing the attendance at the school. But she said if they had it to do over, and they chose it because it was cheaper than an electronic sign, just the kind of things that you were pointing out. She said point blank, if they had to do over again, they would never put that sign in. And the reason they would never put that sign in is that because when it's 70 degrees outside and sunny, people kill for the job of going out and rearranging the letters. It takes hours to do that. It's not just a simple job. It takes hours to do that. When it's January 15th and it's sleeting outside, you almost have to kill to get somebody to go outside. They actually rewrote the job description for the person who, to do a new secretary for the school, to include in what they advertised as one of your jobs is to go outside regardless of the weather and change the sign. They said they would never do that again. That's one. The other.
I just have to interject really quickly. That makes sense to me, sure. But I will say that I think a comparison between the Walden School on a commercial strip of Providence Road and a residential corner in Nether Providence aren't really comparable. But I understand your point.
My point is just that, the people who put it in said they'd never do it again. So that made us think maybe that's not a viable approach. Second is that we talked about, or you did, and I thought I saw some notes come up, in the scrolling chat line about other churches. And we have talked to almost every church in the area that put an electronic sign in, and they said that their attendance in events at the church went up significantly. No one could quantify the number, but everyone said that the attendance at events at church went up after they put the sign in so they could announce things to the world. Third is that somebody, and I don't think it was you, but just while I have the floor, I want to mention this. Somebody, I think it was Bill, although maybe it was somebody, mentioned that they're worried about the size of the sign. As a committee, we started out thinking we wanted a smaller sign. And when what finally helped us decide was we actually had somebody come out with a truck with a sign on it the size that we wanted. And we looked and said, oh, that looks good there. We parked it on the lawn. So we didn't just pick this in a vacuum. We actually had one parked out there, as well as making a cardboard mock-up of it to confirm both. So we did look at that, and I can understand why people would have concerns about size, because we did too until we actually saw it in person. That's it.
Okay, so I'm looking to see, Sally, you went. Gail Weaver, your electronic hand is up. Did you want to say something?
Yes. Well, one of the points I wanted to make is Walt, who just spoke, has been the person who has been primarily responsible for dragging out the wooden signs, repainting the wooden signs, updating them with various dates and so on and so forth, and grabbing a mallet and hammering them into the ground when needed. And there was a time when, did you have back surgery or something, Walt? I know you were a little, not quite in the physical state where you wanted to be hammering in signs. And he's hard to replace. As you could probably understand, we didn't have a whole lot of other people who jumped up and said, please let me drag the sign out of the spidery shed, so on and so forth, and update it and hammer it into the lawn. The advantage of an electronic sign is, regardless of the weather, regardless of the health of our volunteers, regardless of the age of our volunteers, we can be very agile, very nimble about updating that which is on the sign. We can respond to current events much more quickly. We could extend prayers to something if something happened in the community. We could express that so much more quickly. And as Sally pointed out, we offer a lot to the community, the playground, the preschool, our strawberry festival, so on and so forth, that I just think it's really, relatively speaking, kind of a small ask. And I think it would benefit our church greatly. And the people who think it would be an imposition, I'd ask you to actually question to yourself, how much of an impact will this really have on my life? I really think that after about a month or so, you won't even notice it when you pass. It'll become very much a part of the background. So that's what I have to say.
And I would like to pick up on, let's see, one point. Oh, the use of the hand lettering, as I think we mentioned, if we wanted to display a message on Tuesday, and we also want to display a message about a second item, nursery school on one, and an upcoming event on the other, you can't do it. You go out and set up the words. So there's the only way to be able, to have a sign that can display more than one message on the same day is to use the electronic reader. That's what we concluded. I'm looking for other, there was an allusion to this, and I wanted to address it because I haven't yet, which is the lighting study that we had done. I'm looking for other questions, but Walt, if you could try and pull up the photos that were part of the lighting study. I mentioned this before.
Dave Rudd has something to say.
Who?
Dave Rudd.
Oh, okay. I think it's E.
I can speak while Walt's bringing up the lighting thing.
Okay.
On the day that the synagogue was attacked in Pittsburgh, myself and one of the other deacons took the flowers from the church and delivered them to the 2 Jewish congregations in our area. But we did not have a way to walk over to the computer and express our horror at that atrocity and our heartfelt support for the people who suffered that day. We are in a world that requires much more frequent messaging than the old put out the name of the sermon on Thursday and have the people show up on Sunday. And having a board that can cycle through multiple messages at a modest pace and be exposed to the, 7,000 cars a day that go by that intersection on one or the other side. And to say that we should be filling the lawn with other kinds of signs. The world is moving too fast to ask us to remain in a static position.
I can't get, I'm looking for full screen.
Thank you, David. I have pulled up, and we're getting an echo in this room. Hold on a second. Okay, so I don't know if people who are not in this sanctuary with us can hear an echo, but I've asked Walt to pull up this diagram. There's a second one that goes with it. It's the lighting study that our lighting consultant prepared, and I want to just explain what it means because I only sort of alluded to it earlier.
If you mute Walt, you'll get rid of your echo.
I am mute.
No, you're not.
Oh, not mute. I am turned the volumes down. All right.
So in this diagram, this shows red grids of 100, 200, and 300 feet from the point of the sign over a course of 70 degrees in either direction. So this illustrates, and there's data in the table next to it, but the point of this diagram shows that the disbursement of light from the sign is limited to that grid area. The sign, if you're looking at from the side, you won't see the lighting at all. If you're looking at it from a 70-degree angle, you really barely see it. If you're looking at the sign from directly in front, you'll see it very clearly, the wording. And the lighting intensity degrades over 100, 200, 300 feet. So when you overlay that, you can see that the house at 10 Church Lane has a direct line of sight to the sign. The house, we'll have to use the other diagram. The house at 106 Brookhaven has a direct line of sight, but it turns out there's some trees in the way. The house at 109 East Brookhaven, which is the more modern house, essentially is outside of the scope of any view of the sign. The sign at 100 Avondale, which is directly across the street, is within view of the sign, but it has very thick screening of trees along Avondale, which I suspect is because they were sick and tired of the headlights coming down Brookhaven Road in their living room. And the house at 200 Cricket Lane has essentially a direct line of sight, but the lighting and the angle are such that it will not be noticeable in any way. If you stood in front of your house, the house on 200 Cricket Lane, and tried to read the sign, I don't think you'd be able to see what it said. So again, in the daylight, the sign will be at full brightness in the sunlight, but when it's dark out, which is what I think people would be concerned about, the lighted letters being an intrusion, whether it's into your living room or into your car as you drive by, the brightness of the lettering is reduced 92%, because just like your cell phone, I don't think a cell phone does that, but that degree, but it dims down when there's when it's dark out, because you don't need the brightness. So the impact of this is that this is essentially showing the state of analysis on lighting, LED lighting, on neighbors who have a direct view. And I think this really clarifies why the people whose houses are actually adjacent to the church did not object to the sign, because it's not going to be something that is an intrusion to their house. So what we're hearing, I think, and I understand it, is that people who live nearby in the neighborhood will drive by the sign every day, 2-3 times, coming and going from their house. And the fact that the sign is near where they live is a concern. So I just want to make it clear, there's two different issues there. And we think, again, that by cloaking or surrounding the electronic reader into pillars that appear to be stone and into the same header of the church name as before, that it will quickly meld into the context of our church, to the neighborhood, to the corner. We're confident about that. So I just wanted to present that extra information. I'm looking for other comments. Yes, thank you. So, and I also mentioned that we're coming up at 9:15 and we're happy to continue going. Maybe nobody else is, but we're also happy to follow up with emails and other questions. There's more detailed data on lighting, for example, that I could provide you. Continue this. So we're probably going to shoot to wrap up here in the next 10 minutes or so. Ben, I see your hand is raised, so go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Frank, and thank you, everybody, for all of your commentary and support of the neighborhood for many decades. I am a member of the Parks Committee. I'm Dana's husband, 219 Sykes, and if you haven't been in Furness Park yet, it was just restored with a great path, and I think it adds a lot to the neighborhood, and I think it adds a lot to the train station and everything that we're trying to do to bring community together. I also, as Dana mentioned, we have kids who've gone through the pre-K. We attend the Strawberry Festival every year. There always seems to be a great thunderstorm at the end that brings a lot of fun to that event. Very excited and happy to be neighbors with the church, as Dana put it earlier. Just two things that I wanted to talk about, and I think that Dana mentioned a little bit earlier, is that I think the intention of the electronic sign being white letters on black background with somewhere between 8 seconds and 30-second hold times of different messages, especially size of lettering and all the things that you talked about. I think it may be difficult to create messages that are short enough to be read and full enough to have all the information that you want to include. So I think that you should really think about how if you're trying to get the Strawberry Festival message across, how many different stages of the communication will you have to get out to really get that across? When I looked at the signs, this is what I do. I do advertising and promotion. I won't say the M word, Frank, although I do think that if you're trying to build the viability of the church, that involves revenue, and that involves some of the things that are differentiated from the impact on the community, right? The Strawberry Festival is a nonprofit. It does create impact for the community and gets people onto the site, so they obviously see and learn about the church. But I wonder about the viability directly tied to nonprofit events, and if it really is a motivator for membership, or if it's just a motivator to help the community, and what that sign would do. But I think that the temptation of a sign with humble origins to begin with, I think that in the fast moving world, as people talked about, for cars coming by, and the science and the sociology behind billboards, is that you can really only say 7 things on a billboard before the message is lost. And so I just want you guys to think about how many different stages of communication you'd have to get up for people to really get the message that you're trying to say. And then starting with white letters on black background, I think the temptation of getting out your messaging in a more colorful way, in a more impactful way, will lead to more than just white letters on a black background. And I think that I just, in advertising, white letters on a black background, they're not that impactful. And when you're really trying to drive things, when you get closer to an event, or you say something like Strawberry Festival this afternoon, or something like that, you're going to want to be more vocal. You're going to want to be louder and prouder than just white letters on a black background.
Well, I appreciate that, Ben. I would say that if I understand it correctly, you and Dana are opposed to the sign, even if we never had anything other than white letters on black background.
I just think it speaks to the character of the neighborhood. I know that the Mother of Providence sign is not what you're going for, but that is the relevant comp in the neighborhood. And as neighbors to the church, we don't want to, we don't want to have an electronic sign.
Okay, so I see a hand up for Jim Ottinger. And was there another hand up as well? And again, not everyone is appearing on the same screen. So if I'm not seeing you, you can use the raise hand feature. Well, go ahead, Jim.
It's easy to second guess what the church is proposing for the sign. On the other hand, your wife mentioned that you enjoy using the playground and the church facilities. And so I think it's really comes to the point that says you can second guess this all you want, but if the church has really made a positive, is a positive influence in your life, then, maybe you just ought to say, okay, maybe it's not the right decision that I would make, but go ahead and do it, because it really isn't going to tremendously affect my life one way or the other. Because if anybody says that it's going to negatively affect their property values right now, they haven't seen the real estate ads lately. I mean, so there's a black and white sign that doesn't flash, doesn't look like the billboard at a football game, is not going to make a difference in your property values. And it's going to be totally in keeping with the neighborhood.
Thank you, Jim. Who else? While I'm waiting, I'm going to remind everyone, info@wallingfordpress.org. We would like you to record your support, hopefully, but record your comments either way, and also follow up with questions. And I'm going to continue scanning, but I don't see any other questions. So I guess by way of a wrap up, I guess it's time to wrap up. You can interrupt me if you just thought of something. You know, we mean everything we said tonight, I guess I'll just say. We feel very strongly, as reflected by the 5 years and the investment that we're prepared to make, which was met primarily by private donations. But we feel strongly that this is an important aspect to our continued mission. It's not going to be driving membership. It's going to be driving our mission to the community, which could lead to people becoming more involved in the church. But whether it does or doesn't is not why we're doing this. We're leaving a lot on whatever the metaphor is. We're leaving a lot of information and good news with a capital G and a capital N unsaid at a time when we feel that we should be saying it. You know, in the message to the congregation about this, we refer to the portion of the Sermon on the Mount that talks about when you have a light on you don't take a lamp and put it under a bushel, you let your light shine. We feel we are called to let our light shine to the community. And there's really no other way that we've come up with that we can do that without being able to have flexibility in making messages. So that has led us to invest in a sign that's capable of doing a lot of things that we don't plan to do. The only thing we plan to do is send text messages, which, as Ben just pointed out, are limited to 7 words or whatever. We feel that it's important to us, and we hope that you all will support us. And if you have continuing questions or concerns, info@wallingfordpress.org. I don't see any other hands up. So I will close by saying I hope you all continue to be safe and have a wonderful Christmas. I would invite you here to our Christmas Eve service, which is wonderful, but we're not having a Christmas Eve service, are we?
On YouTube.
YouTube. So check us out on YouTube. And by the way, every Sunday service is on YouTube. But in the near future, we hope that you will all come join us, whether it's the whatever that we're going to hold, or when the vaccine is available, come check us out. We'd love to see you. So I'm hoping to see emails from you. Seeing no other further comments, I thank you for your time. Blessings, everybody, and good night.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Frank.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Frank.
Frank.
Thank you, Frank. Good job. Good night, everybody.